So they gave these metal boxes to the First Nations peoples. They approached the situation like, we want peace. We don't want to fight with you anymore. You've been killing us. We don't like that. Here's some metal boxes. They said, there's magic in the metal boxes. Don't open them until you get home. Okay. When you get home, open the box and share the magic with everyone in the village. Well, what the First Nations peoples didn't know is that what they did was they took somebody who was sick with smallpox and they gave them a blanket and they said, cough all over the blanket, like rub the blanket all over your smallpox pusses and stuff. And then they took this like germ infested blanket and they cut up and they put the blanket in the metal boxes. And then they gave the metal boxes to the First Nations people and said it was magic, right? First Nations peoples take these pox infested blankets and they go back to their villages. And the First Nations peoples have no antibodies to fight the smallpox. Smallpox is something they've never seen before. Okay, much like us today with COVID-19, we've never seen this before. Our bodies don't know how to fight it. First Nations bodies didn't know how to fight the smallpox. And so these people thought, they're giving us magic. It's going to be good for us. So they opened the boxes, they shared it amongst all the people, and everybody got sick. And whole villages of First Nations peoples were wiped out. There was nobody left alive to bury the dead. Everybody in the village would be dead. And there were many, many, many villages that this happened in. It was the first example of germ warfare tactics that we have a record of ever being employed. And it killed a whole whack of the First Nations peoples. They had no defense against this one. And then, so that was a big deal. So he's King George III. He's the King George III of Britain. It's his job to make the decision, right? He's the king of Great Britain, which means he's the king of the 13 colonies. He's the king of the New Quebec, which is named New Quebec. He's the king of all this area here. He gets to decide what's going to happen. So he looks at the situation and he says, okay, I'm going to make a royal proclamation. It's the year 1763. And he says, the English law is going to replace French law in this new colony of Quebec. The Ohio Valley is going to stay First Nations territories. All French and all English, everyone needs to leave the First Nations territories. And what this means for the French is that they cannot continue to be coureur de bois, the fur trading, right? They can't continue to do that fur trading. But this is really hard for the French because they're a little bit less racist than the English. And so a lot of these French, these single men, have been going and they've been living with the First Nations in the First Nations villages outside of what was New France, right? So they had like wives who were First Nations. They have children who are a mixture of European and First Nations blood. And they've been living there, right? Doing the fur trade, living there. And now this royal proclamation says that all the French must leave First Nation territories. They have to leave. And so this is like ripping apart these families, right? These people are being ripped apart from their families. And it's, there are a lot of people unhappy. Okay, let's take a look at this. So the French don't love the fact that their French laws are no longer their French laws. They don't like this. They're used to the laws that they used to have, and those laws are now changed to English law. They don't like that. So the French aren't happy about that. The Ohio Valley is going to stay First Nations territory. Well, the 13 colonies are mad about that. They want to get into that Ohio Valley. They are willing to spread germ warfare to kill all of those First Nations peoples to get access to that fantastic land. They want that land. They're not happy about the Royal Proclamation. And then the French are also not happy about this rule that they can't be with the First Nations, right? Because there are some men there who are families, right? So they're not happy. All right, so now we're going to take a look at the British and the 13 colonies. So we have these 13 colonies all along the coast. I showed you that picture on the map before of this coast. These colonies are expected to pay taxes to Great Britain. Why? Because they are a British colony. And remember now, we have just finished a very expensive war where we took over what is now Quebec, right? We took that over. Remember all those warships that went in? There's like 200 warships. There's all kinds of soldiers. Those men need to be fed. They need to be paid. They need to be like clothed in a nice uniform. It's expensive. Who's going to pay for this? The colonies are going to pay for this, and they're not happy.